Hey guys, it's Ahmer here. So today I wanted to talk about some pretty weird and odd controllers in my video game collection. Now a lot of these items I actually get asked about quite a bit, as when people see them they have no idea what they are. So today we're going to talk about my top 10 in my game room. So let's go ahead and check it out. So whenever I see these videos, of course everyone always mentions Rob the Robot, the Nintendo Power Glove, and the Power Pad. So I wanted to talk about this pretty oddball controller. So this one I actually found at a local video game store, and as soon as I saw it, I vaguely remembered this controller from back in the day, but this is one that you often not see. So this is the Rollin' Rocker for the original Nintendo. It has this little port right here, and then there's even one on the inside. So of course it has this big rounded area that you kind of just use to rock back and forth on the ground. So this is a pretty odd controller, and this thing is just pretty crazy, and it looks pretty sweet in the collection. And then next up we move on to some pretty crazy chainsaw controllers. Now I actually have both of these controllers. So I have the Gamecube version and the PlayStation 2 version. So this actually works with the Resident Evil 4 games, and this thing is just so crazy to even consider playing a game with, because we have these two handles. There are two buttons on each one. There's also a button right here, and then on the top we have these joysticks. We even have this little D-pad, and then we have all of these other buttons, and these actually make realistic chainsaw sounds when you're playing the games. So these are definitely pretty sweet, and I really like how they actually look, as they all are pretty much individually designed, as they have all of this paint spatter on here. It even looks like there's some fingerprints in what looks to be blood. So these are pretty wacky and crazy controllers that it's not often that you'll see anyone even play with these, and these are definitely more so for show as opposed to actual gameplay. So we have the GameCube controller, which is a yellow color, and then we even have this PlayStation 2 version, which has more of an orange color. So that one really looks great with the red blood. And then next up, you'll notice that we have this Sega controller. So this is actually for the Sega Saturn, and this is actually made for the Virtual On game. Now this controller is pretty interesting to play with. I actually used it right as soon as I got it. So you actually use these two handles. There are buttons on the top and buttons on the front. So you actually use this for that game to battle against other robots. So this is a pretty neat controller, but it's not made for very many games at all. I can actually count the number of games that it's used with on just one hand. So this big bulky controller that's only used for a game or two is just insane, and this is definitely a pretty weird controller. And then of course I get asked about these controllers all the time. So they actually look like these light gun style controllers, but they're actually a lot different than that, as they have all of these buttons on here. And it's just so weird that you would even consider playing a Final Fantasy game with these controllers. These are more so replica guns to go ahead and match Yuna's Tiny Bee guns. So these are definitely some pretty weird controllers. This back piece actually comes off. So this one has a joystick. This one has the D-pad. We have these trigger buttons, more buttons under here, and then there's a couple buttons on the side. So this would just be pretty crazy to actually play some of these games with, but they do look great on display, and these are very expensive pieces in my collection, as I've seen these go for several $100s. So these are definitely pretty sweet, but they're more so for display purposes only, as these would be pretty difficult to actually play with. And then of course another crazy controller that's actually getting even more difficult to find, and when you do find it, it is pretty expensive. So here we have this Wu-Tang controller, and this is actually for the PlayStation 1. Now they did make this controller to go along with the Wu-Tang game that's made on the PlayStation 1, which is a pretty awesome game. It's actually a lot of fun, so I'll have to play that for you guys. And I actually found this local to me at a pretty sweet video game store, and they even had a custom Wu-Tang console of a PlayStation 1 to match this pretty awesome controller. So I actually have this on display in my game room all the time with that custom PlayStation 1 console. So this thing is pretty crazy looking, but it's more so for the looks because it is very cheaply made. It's very light, it's not very comfortable, it's hard to even fit your hands around these handles that they made. These buttons just feel really cheaply made, but it's actually a pretty cool controller that was pretty neat to come with the game. So this is definitely another weird controller in the collection. And then on to this particular style of controllers. These are actually a part of the Freak series controllers. Now they did make two for the original Xbox, and then they made others on the PlayStation 2. So these ones are definitely crazy looking. So I actually have the entire set. I did a whole video on the full set of them. So I wanted to show off these because these are immediately what I thought of when, of course, I planned this video. So of course we have this alien infestation controller, and then we have this dragon controller. So these are definitely not made for comfort, and they're definitely not made to play most of the games for the Xbox. So here we have this pretty cool design of a dragon. It has this crazy tail that often gets in the way, and then of course all of these ridges and everything make it very difficult to even play any games. The eyes do light up, so this is just a crazy sculpted controller and definitely looks pretty wacky. And then we have this one. So this has all of these crazy looking eyeballs and faces all over it, and this little alien has these crazy strange teeth. Looks like it's actually ripping through the controller. Has these kind of pointed edges on here and just makes it very uncomfortable. But this is definitely a crazy controller to have in the collection as well. Now, of course, this company didn't actually stop just there. So here we have this fleshy controller, and this is for use with the PlayStation 2, as are these controllers. So here we have this pretty crazy looking controller. It looks like there's a brain right in the middle, where select and start are actually carved into it. We have these pretty crazy faces on each side with these teeth, these wacky eyeballs, and it just looks like a really scary controller. Looks like these are actually a part of the head. So this is just beyond insane looking, and it's even crazier to try and play any games with these, as these are definitely very uncomfortable and pretty crazy looking. This actually appears to be upside down, so you would play it just like this with these long pointed edges on the handles. We have this painted joystick on here, and then these buttons even have raised up sculpts on them that kind of resemble bones. So this Berserk controller is just pretty crazy too. On to the last two in the set. So we have the Samurai and Ninja controllers. These just look very uncomfortable, as the bottom parts actually look like they're wrapped in something, and all of the buttons just have these raised up edges on them. So these are definitely not made for comfort. They're made for more display purposes, and this horror creator who actually sculpted all of these is pretty awesome. And then on to another odd shaped controller. We have this one. It actually is the Alps gamepad for the PlayStation 1. So this says Alps Interactive. It's just this really smooth surface on here. It has a little bit of comfort on the back here where it has this softer material, but it's still pretty uncomfortable, as my hands don't even fit all the way around this. And then pressing these buttons and this little D-pad, but it has a cover over it. So this is just pretty uncomfortable, and I couldn't imagine playing very long with this controller. And then of course we have two more very odd shaped controllers. So this one is for the Super Nintendo, this one is for the Sega Genesis, and there was one made for the Panasonic 3DO. These are more of these fight pads. So these are Capcom Pad Soldier GS pads, and this one is the Capcom Pad Soldier. So these are definitely pretty sweet, as they have 6 buttons on here. They kind of have this curved edge so that you can actually play pretty quick with any fighting game for these systems. So one that actually stands out in particular is playing Street Fighter 2 and playing the Turbo. So this is definitely very helpful when you're playing these fighting games, as you can actually press these buttons a lot quicker. So these are definitely pretty sweet controllers. They are very oddly shaped, as they're not your flat controllers. They actually are more shaped to fit in your hands. And then on to 2 more crazy controllers in the collection. We have this one for the Xbox and this one for the PlayStation 2. These are the Gamester Controllers, and these are actually designed for first-person shooter games. So these are the Radica Gamester Controllers, and these are just pretty sweet looking. They really have a lot of detail and designs on them, with all of this going on up here. So these are definitely pretty interesting. There's even a slot on the one controller. So these actually feel pretty comfortable in your hand. They're designed to actually have your hands hold each side, and your fingers just kind of go right in here where these triggers are. And then there's a couple buttons where your fingers line up on the inner part of this handle. And then you just go ahead and reach up here for the thumbsticks. And then we have this D-pad here with some other buttons right on the top. So these are actually pretty comfortable, but they're just very odd. And there's actually a lot of detail on these controllers. So these are just something a lot different than what you usually see when you see the Xbox and the PlayStation 2. As these are both pretty large controllers, but they really actually designed it to make it comfortable while playing. And then on to a couple more weird controllers. We actually have these fishing rods. So we have one for the PlayStation, one for the Nintendo 64, and they did make others over the years with various systems. So of course you'll notice on the PlayStation version, they don't actually have this long addition to the controller. This one just makes it even more realistic, like you're actually fishing. So of course you hold the handle, and then you'll have to reel in the fish whenever you catch it. So these are just pretty crazy controllers, and they only work with a handful of games, or whichever games were released with these fishing rods. And then on to another weird Nintendo 64 controller. They also made this for the PlayStation as well. So here we have this Ultra Racer 64. So you'll notice that it's this very odd shape. It's made by Performance. So on the back here we have this A and B button, but it's more like a little toggle that you just kind of push forward or pull this way while you actually hold a grip on it. And then we have this little steering pad where you just turn it. We have these buttons on here, several more buttons all on here. So of course this is very different than a lot of your controllers, and it's something that you'll have to get used to while you're playing these games. And then on to another racing controller. We have this Logic 3, and this is a pretty interesting RC style controller. It has these little switches on the side, a tension release, and then we have both of these triggers right here, and then all of these buttons on the side at the bottom, and then you can turn it on low or high, and then have all of these DualShock and other options on there. So this is a pretty interesting style controller. So it has this D-pad up here, all of these buttons, and this is a pretty crazy controller. And I'm sure that this one would definitely be pretty crazy on how to actually get used to playing a lot of these games with it. And then on to this last controller. So I was actually given this controller for free when I picked up some pretty cool video game items from a local game store. And this was a part of the PlayStation Kids Station. So this only worked for that game, and it has these huge buttons on here that would definitely keep it easy with kids playing these games. And this is just a pretty crazy controller, and I didn't even know what to do with it. So I figured I'd include it in this video, as this is definitely an odd looking controller, and I had to do more research on it as soon as I added this to the collection. So overall, I have tons of weird and oddball controllers in my video game collection. So these are just some of the ones that I immediately thought of while making this video. I'm sure that there are several that I missed while making the video, but a lot of these are just pretty crazy. They're very uncomfortable. I'm not sure what they were thinking when they designed these controllers, and some of them are just really awesome looking on display. So we have a majority of these controllers ranging from pretty much every system out there. And these are just some of the oddball controllers that I've seen over the years, and some of these are actually pretty difficult to find nowadays, and they're very expensive. So of course, let me know in the comments below which controllers you remember playing with while growing up, and which ones I may have missed in this video. So of course, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Go ahead and check out my other videos and stay tuned for more.